Welcome to the Poetry Show with us, the podcast poets. This is a podcast that aims to bring poems and discussion about poems and whatever else that runs through our little minds to people who love poetry. To those of you who really aren't all that sure about poetry, but we will lead you to us because you're here. And to poetry novices, and maybe we can inspire you to try a poem for yourself. A word of warning, we might use a couple of edgy words. You know, we're kind of PG-13. So every week, we will discuss a theme and look at how 4 very different poets work within this theme to create a poem, or retrofit one. Hopefully, we'll find something for everyone. So we'll each do a poem, and we'll chat about that poem and move on to the next. I'm Rose, and we are here today with
Becca
and
Neil
and
Alan.
Yay! And Neil is back again. Thank you. Hello, Neil.
It's been a while.
Yeah, no, I love that. Actually, it worked out really well in a bizarre sort of way of between jobbedness. So that's all right then. Yes. Today's show is about machines. And what's interesting about machines is I realize that I just don't write about machinery pretty much at all. Not any, to be honest. I write about snow, water, sunsets, skeletons, of course, religion, sometimes hearing a train, but that's about a longer thing about something else. And so, you know, I was trolling through my poems, the old snippets of stuff, the stuff I've almost finished, the stuff I should finish, notes, and I discovered I just don't write about machines. So, anyway, I might have something about cars, and I might do a poem about riding on a bus past some hot, dry scenery in Cyprus. And I did write a poem about the Minster bells, and that is machinery. But most of what I do doesn't require more equipment than a pen or a magnifying glass. Well, okay, and a camera. A camera is indispensable. And I do write on a computer, and I used to feel very creeped out that when I left my word processor behind, that I was just going to be just tapping into nothingness. So actually, I think I will do that poem. So I used to use a word processor, which I really, really liked because it made things go onto kind of ribbons. And even using the word processor was a big jump from the carbon paper I used to use when I used a typewriter. So that to me is maybe about the fact that I'm not sure necessarily about machines. Oh, and years ago in a writing group, there was a guy who would only use a manual typewriter. He said, "Power outage? What power outage?" And he refused to use anything that couldn't just be picked up, and it didn't have to be plugged in. And I think he wrote in a shack in the woods type thing. So I tend to write about concrete things. Yeah. But this is an older poem, and then if we get to it, I've done a brand new poem that I did last night. So, and this is about moving from the word processor to a computer and how I was hesitant, although Emily used the computer in those days. And it's $10. We're still back in America. So it was a coupon at Staples, which is an office store. $10 off at Staples. It is sad to look at this coupon and think, when this thing expires, my trip to the Bahamas will have come and gone by a week and a half. My new greenhouse will have been built, they claim. And Em will probably be in a whole nother school, the kind for special kids. Her classmates left behind, relieved, sad, wondering, maybe, if they'll be next. I stare at this possible down payment on a flatbed scanner or more of my stubbornly used word processor ribbons. I cannot type exclusively into cyberspace, liquid ephemerality of computer screen, a beckoning Satan, come, use me, record your insights and most sacred fears, and I'll erase them. I stare and dream of reams of blank pages, the scanner, a color cartridge I've promised repeatedly to replace. But all I see is the expiration of April, of an overpriced greenhouse, of an outrageously overpriced geographic diversion, of a doomed foray into budget private school. A trip into spring and a fall into debt and a pile of now useless blue khakis. I blink, but the scanner is gone. See, I just not sure about machines. I'm kind of, what's the word? Is it Philistine? No, Luddite. Yes. Luddite. Well, I'm not sure about automation. We keep automating everything until basically you just need one guy pushing one button to have an apple delivered to him till the computer realizes they don't even need that guy anymore. So there'll be nothing left. If you automate everything away, there's no real reason for us to exist. Yes?
I mean, I think that automation is automation, barring some really stringent regulations being brought in, which I don't think anyone's lobbying for, so they're not going to happen.
Exactly.
Is going to happen. I think the question is how society reacts to it, because there will be fewer jobs, and that's sort of that. Not to go on a complete sort of kind of lefty tangent, but that's where the idea of a guaranteed
basic income.
Oh,
yes.
Sort of comes in.
Well, that will lead to more unemployment, but I love the idea of a basic income. I mean, there's a job center people just out of work. Sorry. But you know what? If everyone had, my thing is, it shouldn't be enough to live on, just enough to not die on. So that if it's just basically what they give you anyway for job seekers allowance, or some dreadful little low level PIP, just a little bit more than that, like 3 or 4 or 5,000 a year. Nothing really, but enough that if you could crash at a friend's house and share the rent. You could eat something on a regular basis. You could be inspired to follow your dreams and become a poet or an author or that. I think that 3,000 or 4,000, and they wouldn't need the bureaucracy.
I know that's like a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, but I still think so.
Then you create another issue because what you create is low-hanging fruit for people who want to save money in budgets, and that even if somebody creates that, somebody 10 years later will cut it off because it's far too expensive for the nation.
No, not really. It'll be cheaper.
It may be, but that's not.
I think in terms of like technology and unemployment, I was having this conversation, an old conversation with an anarchist friend of mine, the older, you got these self-checkout things now, and it's
I don't
use the self-checkout because I want to keep the person employed.
Yes, thank you.
And that's always been my stance. And he looked at me and said, yeah, but technology is eventually going to lead us to a labour-free society, and you are prolonging that person's time in wage slavery, which I don't know if it entirely convinced me as an argument, but it was another...
Yeah, I mean, I perhaps with a little bit of shame do use the automatic one, just because it's one less person that I can get social anxiety over, basically. And sometimes I just want to go to the shop and get some milk,
Yeah.
I know, I get stressed out by the automated machine's voice.
Oh, it freaks me out.
Please put your thing in the bagging area. I have put my thing in the bagging area.
Oh, I know, and I'm not using a bag, or it's too heavy, or it doesn't fit on the bagging area for some bizarre reason.
But enforced idleness is a problem because it leads towards slavery, because you
really?
Then find people. No, then you have to find things for people to do.
Well, there's that. There's the workhouse, which is what I've been looking at in Oslo.
We have a government that's been moving that way, with these compulsory jobs for people and so on and so forth.
With 0 hours.
Yet at the same time, they're giving large companies money to get rid of people to employment.
Well, see, now if that was changed, if a lot of these tax breaks were changed, see, that's why the basic income is okay. You get rid of all the bureaucracy that supports anything except someone who truly needs everything because they can do nothing, or they are severely limited by what they can do and they need extra help. That stays in place. And the basic income would have to go to everyone, because once you means test things, that re-adds the layer of bureaucracy. Just give it to everyone.
Yeah, but
a millionaire, all of it.
Yeah, but there's another side to that, which is a problem. What I think we should be looking towards is actually taxing jobs lost to automation. So if you reduce the number of supermarket checkout people, you still have to pay the complete salary, 100% of the salary of the checkout person as tax. I think it's inevitable.
Great.
It has to happen.
On a level, but I do actually think that what is inevitable is going to happen, perhaps not in our lifetimes, is the labour-free society where we have got machines to the point that they do the work for humans. That's where we're progressing. We're making machines do so many things that we will eventually get to the point where there are no human jobs anymore. There are no need for jobs. You maintain the machines which maintain us.
But what does a labour-free person do?
Yes, exactly.
That's a real issue.
Yeah.
But creative people are also anti-government, so you can't have those. It's a problem.
I know Machiavelli was really strongly pro-republic. So was Dante.
Expand.
I mean, the Inferno is full of the political regime of the time themes and caricatures of figures in there.
Yes.
Like, he was a strong Republican. He wrote that thing in exile.
But Machiavelli,
yes, are you describing Republicans as a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not.
Oh, no, he means he means not bad. Monarchy, yes. No, good.
He means a government of the people.
Yes,
right,
but the Republican today is a bad thing.
Oh, well, the American
if you're
ones,
American.
Yes. You look at them and go, man, what's up with that?
As someone with a mother who grew up in Northern Ireland, I might have a different opinion on Republican if you plant it to a different country.
That's true. There you go. And here, I think. Here in England, it means a different thing. So my poem was, when I wrote this is really old. It's 1999. I have one from last night. But this was me not even wanting to go to the computer screen and liking the machinery and I'm holding it in my hand aspect of the word processor weapons. And when I go off to take pictures of skeletons and I have to use a tiny little memory card for the camera, I never erase the pictures because they exist on this little tiny thing. And I feel that they have to be able to pick it up in my hand and go there. And I have like a stack of them, just like little tiny itty-bitty, just I have to have them because I feel as if otherwise they don't exist. And then you have a computer crash and they actually don't.
And that's another issue is digital decay and all of these old mediums and that sense of things are going to be lost in ways that they never were with books. Because,
Exactly.
Great. I saved this on a floppy drive.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't even read them now. That technology is gone. Exactly.
I mean, both of us now, we have our copies of our poems everywhere.
Yes.
There's on more than one computer, and I also have a binder which is this thick. Read 6 inches or more of every poem I've ever written, so that if it all falls apart, I can type them all in again.
You're that guy
I had to do that once.
Yes.
What happens when the format dies?
Exactly, that's the problem.
What happens, you can't read stuff from a computer 25 years ago on a computer today.
But I have it on paper.
That's
exactly, that's my point.
Exactly. Exactly.
See, I
concrete things.
Yeah. I actually kind of I sometimes feel like I wish people spent more time actually talking about that aspect of the downside of technological progression. Because I've got to say, maybe this is me looking at this from the perspective of a digital native. But often when people sort of say, it's technology, it's making us dumber, or it's making us sort of narcissistic or whatever. I do kind of want to give them the quotes from the 19th century about how trains are destroying conversation on transport, or that things like things like how every time there's a technological
there's that
innovation, there's always some people saying this is going to destroy society.
So much of that also is, my favourite one is admittedly the church saying that street lamps were going to destroy everything because the only thing that kept people from sinning, going off and murdering someone or sleeping outside there or someone else's marriage at night, was that it was too dark to navigate. And I'm just going now they can see in the streets. But a lot of that's also driven, the famous Orson Welles War of the Worlds on the radio. Didn't actually happen. Yeah. No one actually panicked, maybe 2 people, but print media was really threatened by radio because radio was taking up a huge chunk of their profits and their audience.
Oh.
So print media immediately goes, look at how dangerous radio is. And then you see the same thing from radio towards television, and now, of course, what you're seeing with the internet and new digital media and all of the news sources being threatened by the internet, you're seeing TV news and print news and radio news going, sexting, cyberbullying, online recruitment.
Video games make people want to kill people. Clearly.
Exactly.
But you can lose actual good points in all that sea of it's new and I don't like it, and I think I ignored a lot of sort of the actual good points, and it wasn't really until Alan sort of kind of. I heard Alan sort of talking about sort of the fact that kind of we're going to lose a lot of the data that we have that we have now in the future
yes.
Peak knowledge, exactly, that I kind of took that seriously because it can, because I know that's a whole kind of damn old people get off my internet kind of tendency that as an obnoxious young millennial that I sort of tend towards.
So it's been established. I'm kind of steampunk and I just like almost no machines. Actually, in I gotta say, Rika Carousel, early DNA, she would do it with a gel and just running an electrical impulse through the gel to make the snips of DNA travel how far that they were going to do. The bigger ones traveled less far, and the smaller ones traveled further. So that was very steampunk.
I mean, we still do that.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So you see, there's machines and there's not machines. But I want someone to do a poem next because I want to get to the newer poem if I do. So who wants to? I see. Yes. Oh, okay.
I mean, you're talking about biology and the machines used in biology.
Okay, there we go.
Before I ran away to join the poetry circus, so to say.
You were saved.
I was studying biology. I was studying molecular cell biology, and one of the things we have to do is spectroscopy, which is basically where it's a way of determining how dense a liquid is, or essentially how dark a liquid is by shining light through it and seeing how much light gets through to the other side. It's a way it's a way of calculating how much bacteria are in something. Because if there's more bacteria in a sample, then there's going to be more bacteria to absorb the light. So that's a really, really basic way of describing it. And but a while ago, when you're doing spectroscopy, you have to keep zeroing it. Using water to basically say this is your standard for what clear is. You have to keep doing calibrations.
Depends on the water.
And I remember, and I wrote this after talking to my stepmom about how often I feel like I constantly have to recalibrate my understanding of sort of other people's body language and other people's emotions. Where I have to say, wait, did that upset you? Because otherwise, I'll wander into complete sort of fantasy land of either completely underestimating what people are feeling or completely overestimating it. So that's what this poem is about, really. My machine shines light through liquids and tells me how clear they are, but it doesn't have eyes, so it doesn't quite know what clear is. I have to remind it. Here, this is water, and water is clear, and my blind machine is on the path again. Without me, it would wander into marshes, its torchlight reaching, fumbling, wondering what beasts it might or might not shine on.
Ooh, I do like that.
So I was originally going to write some more to that to give it the context of it's not just about spectroscopy, it's about me being an awkward little autistic scientist. But I decided to leave that in the subtext.
I think yes.
Thing.
No, I think actually yes. Well, in a way, then, so the machine can do what it's going to do, but you have to still direct it. So perhaps that's going to still be needed. We're going to need a few things for people to do. I think a few things. Right. Well, then, all right. What kind of machinery poetry do you have, Mr. Neil?
So I've got two today. One's a very happy one about trains. One's a very sad one about trains.
A train is a machine.
One first. Yes. We'll pick up on happiness later. Okay. Hurled along steel tracks in black corridors in a city containing more people than the country I am returning to, though not returning home to. The roar drives your voice from my ears. Once we were close, we were present in each other's lives and each other's actions and thoughts. Now we are slower, older, the program lags. We once had hours of conversation, finding our places in the world by putting the world in its. Those days are gone. You hope you have found your place. I hope you have found better while knowing I am far from mine. I dart and dive, depart and ride, swapping trains and destinations with pain and desperation. Always packed so close to so many, without speaking to any. Always driven.
So in this case, the machine is the train. Do you like trains?
I love trains.
Yeah. That's true.
They feel like adventure to me.
Oh, they still do?
Yeah, particularly in Sweden and Germany and places where you're allowed to smoke on a train platform if it's outside.
True.
It's not adventurous when you're like, well, I'm stood out in the open. No one's around.
But that's the romance of the experience rather than the engineering of the machine.
Oh, no, we're reaching, though.
Yeah, but everything's filtered through human experience because we're humans.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
from
true.
my view, I grew up in the days when trains were real, steam and noise and smoke and smut and dirt and stuff.
Pollution.
Yes.
Pollution.
Well,
yes.
sorry.
It's understandable. Yes, to somebody today, a diesel or a diesel electric.
Yes.
Is another major romantic theme.
Yeah, as much as you
It
have
isn't for me.
steampunk's sort of been brought up, diesel punk is absolutely a thing. Your Mad
Really?
Maxes and your etc.
Oh, yes. That's true. Mad Max is... Okay. That's
I don't,
true, actually.
I yeah, I guess you could think of Mad Max's diesel punk. Sorry, that's a whole tangent. The various
Oh,
Well,
note to
the
self.
weird
substances.
subgenres.
Visit us later. We talk about
episode.
Mad
Yeah.
Max. I'm going to write that down. Actually, machines. When I do think of machines, I do think of something like the steam machines and the early machines and those kind of machinery machines. Yeah. Do you have a machine poem?
Well, I have a couple of machine poems. I'm going to read this one because it's actually I realise that it's a different. This is about another experience of machinery. You know, the days when someone would trundle a traction engine down to the fair, and that traction engine would then drive a whole load of mechanical devices.
All right.
Carousel.
Ah, right.
The carousel goes round and bobbing horses up and down, the organ grinds a merry sound. When roller coaster loops rebound, for frozen faces fierce splash down, the carousel goes round and round. Again the Ferris wheel rewound, the belted band all noises drown, the organ grinds a merry sound. Prestigious feats the crowds confound, cheerful children chasing down, the carousel goes round and round. The parade of wonders all astound, the fanfare heralds monarch's crown, the organ grinds a merry sound. The merry-go-round of the pleasure ground, reciprocating upside down, the carousel goes round and round, the organ grinds a merry sound.
And that is a machine.
Yes.
Yes.
And it sounds like a machine too.
Yeah,
Well,
it's kind
it's
of
a
going
villanelle,
little.
which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
which,
I was going
which
to
is
say
a type of poem which has a particular repeating pattern that lends itself to this sort of word painting.
Well, yeah, I think I've never written a villanelle. I look at them and I admire them, but I look at them and go, yeah, I'm not.
I've written one. It wasn't very good.
No.
But
you wrote it.
That was really kind of that really worked because like it was using the like you said, it was using the sort of the repetitive the iterations. I personally I do kind of find kind of the machines of the Industrial Revolution sort of fascinating to think about. Aside from my comment about pollution, it's
everything was polluting.
There's a horror video game called A Machine for Pigs, and it's the machine in question is the slaughterhouse. But it's
Oh wow!
But it's very much using the idea of a huge heaving, groaning machine with more parts than people can actually understand as a metaphor for kind of the Industrial Revolution and how sort of how human lives were sort of became less valuable in that sort of that groaning machine. And I identify a lot with that metaphor in terms of like whenever you're sort of whenever you feel like the world has too many moving parts, you know, like whenever you think like why don't our leaders just do this? Oh, because of this and that, and it's all there's all these different.
It's too related.
And I sometimes do feel like we're little flies buzzing around this huge groaning machine. That's a tangent, but that's
Well, the one argument we were having a debate we were having on the way over is, Alan, you think that computers aren't machines or digital, or I was confused.
Well, it depends on your definition of a machine.
Well, yeah, I do agree that when I think of machine, I think of steam engines and
a computer,
pistons going up and down.
A computer
gears
inherently
turning.
isn't mechanical, though it emulates mechanical activity. So I was arguing in this particular case that a pair of digital calipers sort of was slightly off on terms of a real machine, which is this whole interplay of cogs and belts and so on. I remember years ago there was a series of books. There were really thick books called The Wonder Book of, and then there would be a thing, and The Wonder Book of Ships. The really good part of it was the inside fly cover, which was there was these gorgeous cartoons of sailors doing stupid things, getting caught up in ropes and getting flags tangled. Really fascinating. But they also had these wonderful, if you like, Parkinson-esque machines that with belts and loops, and foremen getting pulled up because they've been caught up in the belt, and again all the funny accidents that actually kill people that can happen in a huge mechanical water mill, steam mill driven environment.
When I was looking up into the bell ringers that were all disbanded with no real warning in at York Minster, a while back. All 30 of them, just go on, get out of here, go on. And because I was thinking about the fact that I didn't hear the bells as often as I used to, and it started to come back now, but not so much. But I was trying to do research on when does it happen and what had happened, and I was trying to find out how many people are needed to ring the bell. And they were talking about how, it's not, but anyway. But yes, a bell ringer was trying to pull a rope, and they got tangled up in their
it has been known.
Upside down, swaying around. Well, they're like, "Gosh, get John down!" And one broke a little bone in their back, but it could walk. But later on, yes. So this is a first draft. So it's dreadful and doesn't even have an ending yet. But it was because I was thinking about times when I would expect to hear the bells and I hadn't. It takes 10 strong people pulling down with all their might at a certain time and in certain combinations to ring the Minster bells. They get to know each other, become a team. The tenor bell alone weighs 3 tons. I wait at a light, glance at the dashboard. It's 5 p.m. and I realize what is wrong. It's silent. No bung, bung, bung to greet the hour, our own version of Big Ben, and no beeb needed to pause expectantly. And then Big Ben begins. I can well imagine a few loose cannon, but not all 30. No one left to spin the machinery, grasp the ropes and steer the gears, coax a giant metal parabola to bang against the clappers. So that needs to be finished, because it just kind of stops. But kind of stops like the bells. They just, 1 minute they were going, and then they weren't. So that was, and it was, then later on, all kinds of stuff came out and blah, blah, blah. But that, to me, is a machine. Again, it's very old, isn't it? And bell ringing, and the machinery they have now is one thing, but that to me, the machinery of pulling and gears and pulleys, and to me that's...
Yes, because the bell moves not so much as the clapper.
Yes, exactly. The bell does, because they had film of it, and I was sitting there trying to count, but they'd film these people, and it looks to me like it's 10, but I don't know if there'd been something else.
Well, it's as many people as there are bells, so some peals are smaller, some peals are bigger.
Oh, okay.
10 is fairly big.
Yeah, there's all the people, and they're pulling, like, to me it almost made me think of milking a very large cow, because they were pulling independently, and it was just, and this one bell weighs 3 tons. Yeah, so I mean that's just the tenor bell. So they have a range of bells, really. So that was a machine that I thought about recently, and I want to revisit that and expand on that. So you looked like you were making eyes at me, Alan.
Oh, I'm always making eyes at you, sweetheart.
Oh no, see, it's disgusting. We're gonna.
Well, what she means is, will I read a poem?
Will you read a poem?
Will I read a poem?
Will you read a poem, sir?
This is a poem I wrote at a period when I and the immigration authorities in the United States had a bit of
the machinery of immigration.
Well, no, this isn't the machinery of immigration, but I had to come back here and sign on and get jobs and stuff, really boring things. And I was working in a warehouse, and so at some point this poem came out. It needs a bit of work, and I've realised that the rhythm isn't quite right, having reread it, but we'll do our best. It's called Boxing Treadmills. Lay the base box on the floor, set the front stop down more, roll the treadmill to the front, then stop. Safely key and power shunt. Lower the walkway to the ground, stop it for the wrap around, then lower again until it stops. The serial number you must jot and write an R upon a dot. Then staple up the sides as props, retrieve a crossbar from the bin. Ensure the ends are screwed right in. Put it in the top front filler, then it's time to lower the pillar. Check to see if it's long or short, then fold a shape of the right sort. Add in a pack of thingamajigs. Also the spacer with the rigs, left and right arms from the stacks located on the spare part racks. Then in the holder they must slide, on the cover and the inside hide. The outer corners staple and fold, ensure the box you label bold. Lift it up upon the blocks, then band it round until it locks. This is the way that we rebox Tapis Roulant from Reebox.
Those were treadmills?
Yes, basically the treadmills come to the warehouse in a somewhat disassembled state, and the warehouses actually put these things together and then rebox them to ship them out to the various exercise clubs.
The irony is, you're working so hard you would never actually need a treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
No, it was actually it was an incredibly boring job, I have to say.
Oh well.
And you had to remember all those bits to do as you worked your way through each.
You can't even
treadmill.
turn your brain off and let it wander.
You can't actually, because a lot of the industrial stuff we were talking about, the machinery, is if you let your mind wander, you would lose a body part. You had to keep focus and pull this and push that and move that along and move that out of the way. And if it got tangled, don't go in after it. You know, people drown in vats of beer and such.
You know, there's a whole sort of genre of YouTube video which is mechanical processes, sort of that not many of us sort of see. And it's just things like, you know, how ice cream sandwiches are made, and you've got this machine with like the two sort of
those bread things,
the two kind of wafers are sort of like moving down separate tracks, and then you've got a thing in the middle that puts the ice cream in, and they sort of squeeze it back together, and it's like a giant zip. And there's a sort of animated GIF that loops of how a sewing machine works, why you need the two threads and stuff like that, and like there's this kind of this huge kind of audience for just how do things work?
Well,
like,
watching chocolates being made is quite fascinating. You know, the thing goes, and you get this little beautiful curly whirly thing.
That all works on a timer, which is what I tested when I went to school as an engineer. I did that because you started off as a biologist, right, Bex? I started off as an engineer because they told me in 1977 girls don't do that. So I thought, note to self. So I went off, and then I realized, nah. But I started off as chemical engineering because I was good at chemistry, and then moved on to electrical engineering because I had a job at a timing place, and we would test the timers. And I'm a bit of a hippie, so I walked around barefoot. And so when you're testing a time, I was knocked 30 feet one day because I was barefoot. I apparently created ground.
Why.
That's it. That's why, you know. But the timing was, some machines would go for 30 seconds or 20 seconds because they were meant to do this. And they would go forward at every whatever to put the cap on the soda. Then the bottle would come by and a cap on. So they were calibrated for whatever the factory wanted them for. So they were timers. I would test them. I actually kind of liked it, except for I had a headache that day, and at the end of being thrown across the room, the headache was gone. But I thought that might not be what I would recommend, you know, as the thing. Now, at one point, I need to alert my listeners, our listeners here, that at one point, Neil stole my pen and started scratching imperiously on bits of. Well, you can keep it now. You have cooties. But Neil, you were scribbling things. Were you writing a poem?
I was editing.
You were editing.
Or finishing an unfinished one.
That's good.
It was actually inspired by the Machine for Pigs and the machinery and society as a factory. Written a while since. Train's coming. I can hear the weight of all that freight, and I can't wait. Made to carry cargo, wood, stone, metal. Now the cargo is human, the raw materials for society. Cargo that loads itself. Cargo that pays to load itself. And the accepted cost of moving cargo is that sometimes a log must fall beneath those steel knives and splinter eternally.
Ooh. Yes. Well, yes, actually. And there's the machinery. That's it. Well, I'm still a kind of a steampunk early light machine person.
I like that thing about the cargo has to pay for its own loading.
Yeah, no, I like that.
It just reminds me now of being the insult of actually being charged to pay. You know, BT used to send us a bill and they charge us $5 for the privilege of paying them, which was which really incensed me.
Sorry.
And we get the same thing. We just installed internet. They mail the internet stuff to you, and if it's not there, you have to go off and get it. Why can't the installer bring the toy with them?
Yes, it was just
a nonsense way that we've organised our lives, that essentially, as the customer, we have to be inconvenienced.
The machinery parts don't line up. That's what it was. Yes. They were going to mail Emily a router, and they assured me it fit through the letterbox. And of course, it got there, and it didn't fit through anyone's letterbox ever. And so they took it away again. And she shows up to have the installer come, and there's this little card on the floor going, "Sorry we missed you, but we couldn't stick the router through the mailbox." And she went, "No." no, what do I do? So that's over reliance on the machinery of things.
Well, it's
but
about what Metropolis was about, and you're tying into that same idea of as the human. Well, we've got to the point now that these marching humans are now being marched off the edge of the cliff because we don't need them anymore.
Well, that's the fear. If we get to a post-labor world, that's a bit creepy. I don't know.
You're killing off all the consumers. It's something they haven't fully thought through yet.
No,
I mean,
yes. Well,
often kind of I know I kind of went on a little bit of a ramble earlier about sort of society as a machine, but like
no, I think it is.
But like it's how I feel whenever you hear people saying, oh, you know, our society or our economy is far too complex to make this major change. Like that's what I mean by like there's too many moving parts.
Yes.
You know, like you kind of go
or dominoes.
Well, no, you can't have a living wage because it'll have this massive sort of knock-on effect on this whole delicate system that we're working within.
Well, they've tried that with raising the minimum wage, and they're afraid to raise the minimum wage because then small businesses would struggle. But they've done this in Seattle, in America, and there's actually an increase of jobs. See, because if you have more money, you can buy more stuff, or at least buy better food, at least do things like go to the movies, which actually let someone who's an actor be employed and such like.
If you start modelling a lot of these things like an economy as a system, you start to realise that if you keep taking things out at the top and not putting it back in at the bottom, eventually everything dries up.
Yes.
You know, the system fails if it is not a complete loop. We have an economy at the moment which is not a complete loop. And so it's bound inevitably to fail.
The wheels are going to come off the machine.
Yes. Well, there's no oil. There's no oil coming into for the wheels.
Luckily, if the system has become too complex, there are a few people out there with a lot of power who are really interested in doing a hard reset. So.
Yeah, well, we're going to see. I think we're going to see how that machinery works out. And in any case, we have tried to garble at you about machines. And we've had a bunch of poems that kind of sort of relate to machines in a vague way. And an old one that is probably beyond anyone. They're all going, what's a word processor? And a new one that I need to fix. And then other stuff. But anyway, so, you know what? You too can get involved. So please send us some ideas for themes or topics that you want to hear us discuss. Challenge us. Play Stump the Poet. Send in wacky topics and go, yeah, write about that.
Try and find something that's unwritable and we'll write about it anyway.
Exactly. That's it, exactly. No, the gauntlet has been thrown down. See, not a machine, a gauntlet. You too can get involved. So send us some ideas for themes or topics you want to hear. So come back next time when we might be discussing unnecessary travel or seasons or the moon or whatever you send in. We have been The Poetry Show, and we are the Podcast Poets. So tweet to us on Twitter at Podcast Poets. Email us at podcast@podpoets.com. And find us on iTunes and give us those reviews and ratings. This has been The Poetry Show, produced and edited by Adam Tagliati as a production of Eden Agency.